Did you know that kinky wellness is integral to your self-development? Hi, my name is Dana Shergill. I'm a kinky wellness coach and owner of The Partition, home of kinky wellness. Each Monday, I bring on a guest to discuss why kinky sexual wellness deserves a seat in the wellness conversation. You can catch my solo shows on Wednesdays, but let's jump into it. Hey, and welcome back. Today, we welcome to the stage Azura Maneater to talk about burlesque, sex, and you. This sultry voice vixen is a force to be reckoned with and has been singing, dancing, and acting since a very early age. Azura has performed on screen and off and has taught all around the world and now teaches burlesque and chair on Monday nights at Brass Vixen, which is where we met. So welcome to the show, Azura. How are you?
Oh, I'm good on this sunny day, finally, right?
Oh, you know what? They gave us a little bit of a break here to see the sunshine today.
Yes, it's been a chilly spring.
Well,
Yeah.
my first question, actually, before we get into burlesque and sex and everything to do with it, is how did you choose your name, Azura Maneater?
Well, you know what? I always loved the name Azura. For a long time. Yeah, for a long time I was like, if I ever have a girl, I'll name it Azura, but it's not gonna happen. So I chose it for my burlesque name. And then Maneater, I don't know. I think I was rehearsing and with love letters in the very beginning, and it just sort of came to me. I think just with my character and just because I'm kind of like out there and I'm, in people's faces, and yeah, it
Is
just
that
came to
her?
me. Yeah.
Is
So then
that
I
her
went with it.
character? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, coming from sort of my background, which is, musical theater and like a heavy dance background and singing and all that, it just sort of made sense for me, and it's kind of like a bit of a watch out, but at the same time brings all the silly and all the fun and all that as well. So yeah, it just sort of came to me one day. So nobody picked my name, but that does happen in burlesque a lot, is that you get a name chosen for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
From someone else?
Yeah, usually like if you're kind of in a little company or if you take class, and you're training and you're coming up with ideas, sometimes the teacher or sometimes, the choreographer in the company might just be like, "Oh, you know what you're like?" And then they'll just give you a name. And then a lot of other times people pick their own name, but it just depends.
Oh,
Depends
that's
on how it happens. Yeah.
good to know. But so your history with this. So where does this all start? How did you get into burlesque?
Well, I've been dancing and performing since I was a kid. My mom actually has a dance studio out west. So I started dancing at like 3 and jazz, ballet, tap, modern hip hop, all of that competitive dancing. Started teaching when I was 16 as well while I was dancing. And then I did, theater school, regular plays, musical theater, and I was in Toronto already. I moved here first of all in 2001, and then I did the movie Chicago.
That's
And then
amazing.
after that, I went to New York and studied, and then I went and toured a show in England, and then came back to Toronto, and then moved back to Vancouver. And when I came back to Toronto in 2013, yeah, auditioned for Love Letters, and it was really more of a dance troupe, but doing burlesque. So we were really dancing. We were all trained dancers, and we would rehearse like daily, do a bunch of shows, and so it was amazing. So that's kind of where I went from just all different styles to really getting into the burlesque world.
And was there a reason why you were drawn to the burlesque world? For any particular reason?
I don't know. I was doing a pantomime at the time.
Mm.
So I was doing a kids show. Yeah, and someone just told me to go and audition, and I went to a show first and saw one of their shows, and I was like, wow, this is really beautiful and sexy and really great dancing. And I love the artistic director, who's now one of my good friends, Pastel Supernova. And yeah, I just was like, yeah, I want to dance all the time, and it's great to be in a company, and I loved it. So I had never done a real tease before that. I had done shows where I did comedy stuff where I would, take off something, or, I did a lot of sexy sort of dancing, but it was never, a tease or anything like that. So that was new for me.
And
And
how did,
even,
sorry, to your point, and so how did burlesque, has it changed your opinion about how you view sex and your sexuality and your sensuality and everything with that since getting into it?
Yeah, I think so. I think before, I think growing up, I mean, there's kind of a little funny story. When I was very young, I used to compete in ballet, and you start in ballet, and there's a thing called musical interpretation. And it's a category where you just hear a song and you have to stand by the side of the stage. You listen to the song and you don't know the song beforehand, and then you have to get up and just freestyle it.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a ballet song, a classical music song, and I was probably 5, and my parents actually have it on video, and I went out there and I bumped and grinded. I was shimmying. Yeah, I mean, my ballet teacher was horrified, but my parents thought it was hilarious. I added some ballet moves in there too, but yeah, because I could just make it up and I could do what I wanted, it was pretty clear that I wasn't going to be a ballerina.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. I'm glad that that moment's caught on camera for you.
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen it in years, but I think, going through and, in musical theater and all types of dance, you're going to have a sexuality. I think I sort of always had sort of a sex appeal, but I don't think I really found myself that way and in my dance really until Love Letters in the same way. And, being comfortable in my own skin, because when you dance and compete and when you start to audition for professional projects in dance, you're very, especially when I did at a very young age, I was everybody was a certain size. So it was like if you weren't that size, you're not going to book that show. And it was, you just had to accept it, right? So it was nice to be in something where it was like appreciated all different body types, and that if you were good, then you were good. It didn't matter about the way you looked and what your body was like. So it was really freeing for me to start to be like appreciate my body and what it could do, rather than thinking of all the negative things that, through auditioning and everything can really, weigh heavy on you. So yeah, it was definitely freeing. And every year, and as you get older too, you start to appreciate things more and realize, like, why am I thinking of all the negative things when I could be thinking about the positive things?
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like auditioning for like shows versus burlesque sounds like it's two different ball games.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you don't really like, Love Letters was sort of a different beast because we were like a dance company that did burlesque. But when you are doing shows or get gigs for burlesque, usually you're sending a video of like a performance you've already done. And then they're seeing your act and going, oh, we like that act. We'll put you in this show. Or we've seen you here or here. We'll put you in this. So it doesn't have the same kind of competitive vibe that when you go to a dance call of 500 dancers and you're dancing with 500 dancers split up in time, learning choreography on the spot. It's a different energy, right? So yeah, I think because I did all that, it made it much more comfortable for me in the scene because I had already been there, done all the other stuff. So I wasn't quite as nervous.
yeah, well, I definitely think that you bring it and an energy definitely to the class that wakes me up. Like when I'm
Yeah.
there, I'm like, okay, I'm here. It's dance class. Yes, let's go. It's chair. I absolutely love chair class. Tell you, I love it.
Yeah. Well, I love having you, but well, let me ask you something.
Yes.
So have you found that it's helped your sexual self since you've been taking my class?
I think that I've been able to do what I feel inside. The sexiness that I feel inside is easier to come out through these moves.
Yeah.
You're teaching me like the flow of it. I like how my body moves with that. And before taking these classes, I would say I was kind of chunky and like the moves weren't as smooth as they could be. And I'm constantly learning that. But I honestly love the visualization of just looking at myself in the mirror and just seeing my own body move to that.
Hmm.
And, my husband definitely enjoys the benefits of it, but I do see myself as like, wow, I like this.
Yeah, I've seen the growth in you for sure over the time that you've been taking my classes. And yeah, I think I tell everybody, the mirror is there for us for a reason. And a lot of times we don't want to look at ourselves, but we're all so different that we have to find our angles. We have to find what works for us, because the way that I do something with my body isn't going to necessarily look the same on someone else, right? So look how your body moves. What shapes can you make, and how do you feel, and really just starting to accept yourself and then growing, right? And I think that's
I
what I
think you
see in
do
you.
that in your class very well. That's like you have a really strong message. And I do believe that it is important for people to connect on some sort of like dancing level or using your body for sensuality. And chair and burlesque is such a great avenue for that because it's it can be super sexy and risque and all this jazz, or it can be super just soft and very sensual and very connected to the person in a chair. So I do think that people need to see both sides of those.
Yeah. No, I think all styles is really important to do, because, start with something that you really like and then start to learn different things and different styles because essentially, burlesque is dance. It comes from dance, it comes from vaudeville, right? So, there's lots of really big burlesque people, for example, Dita Von Teese, who's gorgeous, amazing, all the things. But, she doesn't do a lot of dancing. Right. She does a lot of walking, posing. She hands her clothes off to like gorgeous men on the side because they're made of thousands of crystals. And you know what I mean? So it's a different kind of vibe. And then there's the people that really dance and also, strip and do all the things. So, I think there's just so many levels. I think when you're learning, it's just so great to take class and to see shows. Yeah.
Is there different types of burlesque, like different subcategories of it, or is it kind of like burlesque is a umbrella term for it, or
Well, I think burlesque is burlesque again, coming from vaudeville and sort of a campy, there's different
Mm.
sides of it. I'd say, there's classic burlesque. We talk about classic burlesque. It's, the feather fans, the corsets, the, just a really classic look, sheer, panel skirts, gloves, all these things. But now there's so many aspects and so many different types of burlesque. I mean,
Mm.
even in town, there's companies called Nerd Burlesque, or people do shows that are all Star Wars, or like people do all different types of burlesque. And so, in one show you could see all different types in one show, or you might go to a show where it's all one vibe. Maybe it's all more dark, it's more, yeah, I mean, it could
So it could
just
be
be
anything.
anything now.
Ah, okay, that's
Yeah.
exciting. So really anybody can get into burlesque then. Sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, anyone could. Again, I'd say, like anything, it's not just an easy 1, 2, 3. I think getting on stage doing anything, I think you want to feel your best, and I think you want to train. People ask me that a lot when they take my classes, and it's their first time taking my class and they enjoy it and they come up and they're like, I just really want to get on stage. And the first thing then they say, what should I do? And I say, take class, and it's one of those things. You don't have to be from a massive background in dance, but you do have to train because you got to move with the music, and also you have to take clothes off at the same time in a timed manner that looks effortless. And
Mm.
if you haven't practiced, or you don't have any movement in you and you feel awkward, well, that's going to translate to the audience. And audiences, in those first moments that you step on stage, they want to feel comfortable. So they
Mm-hmm.
want to relax and they want to enjoy it. And if you're uncomfortable, that translates, right? So it's very important to train and just to feel good in your body before you step on stage.
That's very good to know. So when you're say your first time going in, is there some do's and don'ts right off the bat that there's common mistakes that people make when they go into a burlesque class for the first time?
Class, I don't think there's any mistake you can make in class. I mean, I think
Hmm.
in class, just come to learn, you know what I mean? And just take class and all that. There's certain things I suggest, like get a pair of heels you like to wear and start to wear those in class, and then build yourself up to different heels. But just start where you're at and just start to feel how you walk in a shoe. All these types of things, in when we, in burlesque class, we go across the floor, we walk, and people kind of laugh sometimes because they're like, oh, well, it's just walking, like it's no thing. But once you put a pair of shoes on, and once you imagine the lights and you imagine your costume, you imagine all these things, like, there's a different way that you walk than you would walk outside. So I think it's important to start to feel what it feels like to wear a heel, to dance in a heel, to move in a heel. So I do tell people to make sure to bring that, but they don't have to wear some crazy high heel, they don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do something crazy. Wear something you feel good in. I think that's really like when you're starting, wear clothes you feel good in. Go to class in something you feel nice when you look at yourself in, and it can be anything that you can move in.
Mm-hmm.
So for class, I don't think there's really any big do's and don'ts other than like be respectful of everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody else is learning at a different, everyone learns at a different rate, right? And I think everyone there is very respectful. In most places I've taught, people are very respectful, right? So I think that's what that's all I'd say for class. Getting on stage,
Okay,
that's
here
a
we go.
different story. Yeah.
So what are the do's and don'ts of stage then? There's like is there just faux pas that just you don't go?
Yeah, I'd say so. Should we start with the don'ts or should we start with the do's?
Let's start with the do's first, actually. We'll go a little bit with the do this and then the don'ts. Really don't do this. Don't do this.
Okay. Well, like I said before, I would say do take as many classes as you can. And yes, take class for me, but also take class with other people, take workshops, different styles, do all of that so you can find like your vibe and keep training. And then also go see shows. So we're lucky to live in Toronto. There's tons of shows. I mean, people all the time, I'm surprised because, I'll say, "Oh, have you guys seen any shows?" Or I'll say something in class and most people like hadn't even been to a burlesque show and they're just confused that there is even burlesque shows in town, and there's tons in this city, tons. All you have to do, go to Eventbrite, just put burlesque Toronto and you'll see a list for pretty much any day of the week. So, go see that, see what you like, so that would be definitely a do, is to do that. Obviously talked about the shoes, creating a character, creating a name, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes that can be yourself. Maybe you're already a certain way and you like that way and you're just going to create it around your own persona. I'm not that different. Azura Maneater is me. It's not super different than my personality, other than, literally be a little darker, maybe a little sillier, maybe, it's just ramped up for me. Whereas other people, they're very different than their regular person.
Mm-hmm.
They want a persona that takes them into something completely else. They talk about Beyonce, always talks about she's Beyonce and she gets on stage and she's Sasha Fierce, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that is for you, that's what I say, create your character. And also that character, you don't have to feel like you're stuck in a box either. That character can change, right? You come up with a name, and just because my name's Azura Maneater doesn't mean that I'm always like super aggressive and all these kind of things. It means I can be anything within that, right? There's also creating an act, right? So if you're going to do something in a show, most people want to see an act, meaning like a start to finish, a story within a song, could be a couple songs together. Maybe you have props, all these kind of things to create a whole act. And that's what most people want to see. And then on the other side of that, there's sometimes you're hired to just dance with a band, and then you have to learn how to freestyle and you have to learn how to do that, and not necessarily know what music it's going to be. So on that note, I say to everybody, practice listening to music over and over. Also, just listen to music and dance in your place, or all these things to start to feel the music and start to anticipate things that are happening in the music, big crashes, the low beat, the bass, the like all these things that we can use to do a glove peel or to take off your rope, whatever it is, right? That you want to really, the musicality, I think, is so important in burlesque. And you're only going to learn that by doing it, by taking class, by researching, by listening to songs you like. And on that note, connect with something you like, right? It's your first act. You're creating your first act. What's your favorite color? What color do you want to wear on stage? Do you want to do a pink look? Start with that and start to build from that. And, you can start simple. You don't have to have everything to begin with, you can get stuff online, secondhand, and you can add to it. And that's what I always suggest, is start small and then build your look. A lot of people have the same act for years and they build their look until it's beautiful. And then, and then as you perform more, you have a bunch of different acts. So you might go somewhere and be like, "Oh, I'm going to do my blue look tonight, and it's going to be to this and this," or yeah. So there's a lot of things, but
That was great. You're mentioning to character when you're creating a character, you mentioned names and or say like to pick a name and kind of a persona, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so different. Now,
yeah.
is there other things that you should consider when building out a character or a look, like an accessory maybe, or like what different types of accessories are popular with characters
Yeah.
or something?
I'd say, where's the song from? What does the
Mm.
song do to you? Is this a song from the 1960s? Does it make you feel, is it, are you going to do a 1960s look? Are you going to wear a beehive? Are you going to have a short little dress with knee-high boots and lashes? Like, are you going to, most people do the whole thing and they go from an era. right? So a classic bump and grind, you might wear a really classic costume, a panel skirt, a corset, long gloves, a boa, all these kind of things. You always want beautiful things that you can take off, that aren't too hard to take off as well. As you get more advanced, you're working with steel bone corsets and things like that, and taking those off on stage, there can be mishaps, and we've all had them, right? But you have to try to make it as graceful as possible. And that's why you got to practice, right? And you practice taking things off in the proper time to the music. And that's why I say start simple with a costume, don't go to all the things right away, because, it can be just as beautiful to work a boa and to take that off properly and take gloves off properly than trying to take off too many things in one
Yeah.
act when you're just beginning.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. So what would be some of the don'ts of not to do on stage then?
I can think it's a costume things that do stand out to me that people do a lot is, be careful when you're layering things. We all have our own insecurities on our bodies, right? So sometimes you think if you're more covered up and you layer tights and you do these things that you're going to feel better, and maybe you feel like you look better, but you got to look at the lines that you're creating, because sometimes if you layer tights and the tights end at a certain point and then you've got an underwear line and then you've got another thing, I mean, it's one of those things, the lights are going to catch everything. You've got holes in your tights and your nylons. Maybe it's a better option, don't do a nylon, you know what I mean, where there you can do a garter belt and you can attach the garter belt to a garter, right? And then just wear that if you love your legs, and you can do that and they don't have to worry about the nylons. I see stuff like that a lot, where people are just, they got their costume together, but they got a rip in their tights, or they've got a run in their nylons, and hey, that could work for a certain type of act if you're doing a certain type of act like that. But you got to be careful if you're doing a classic act or anything else. People are going to notice that on stage. They're going to see the run in your tights. They're going to see these things, right? And hey, we've all done it. We've all had accidents. We've all had things happen. But just to be aware of those things and just really understand your costume and have practiced so many times getting out of it. Just to the point where you should be sweating just at home, just even practicing, just taking things off, just doing it over and over, because things can happen on stage, a flashing light, somebody does something, someone distracts you, like there's a lot going on, right? So just to feel your best in whatever you decide to do.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Now, you said something of glove peeling. That sounds like a term there. Are there any other types of burlesque terms that get thrown around on stage or between dancers?
There's so many. What you mean, like types of burlesque, or what?
Oh, like with the glove peel, like what type of
Oh,
terms or words, I guess, would be heard often backstage?
yeah, you're gonna hear peel a lot, because
Yeah.
essentially, if you think of it, you're usually doing it slow, right? You always want to, and I say this in class, it's like you want to show the audience what you're going to take off. You want to tease them with it, right? So if it's a glove feel, you're going to show them first and then you're going to peel it off, right? So the word peel, right, is kind of what you want to do, right? A lot of times you don't want to do it too fast. There might be times where you just boom, you throw something off, and that's something else. But yeah, peel, tease, these are the kind of words, right? I mean, we say strip, but I think we don't say it as much because we're not strippers in the sense of like we're not working a pole, we're not getting, it's just a different element. It all comes from similar things, and I think both are great. They're just different, for one, we don't get fully naked, right? So you always have a panty on, or you could have a merkin on, which I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
So that just covers, so without underwear lines, it covers your
Oh,
vajayjay,
okay. Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that.
Yeah,
And
that's
then it
funny.
like tucks under. So you wouldn't have any lines on the side. So you have to glue it to
Oh
the
my
top.
gosh.
And then yeah. So there's people that do that. And those acts usually, it's a more of a standing thing. You show, you reveal, and you're not gonna do any crazy dancing usually when you have a merkin. But I've seen it. I have seen it.
So
Yeah,
you
there's so
don't
many
get fully
different things.
naked. Sorry, that is that. I guess that's a misconception that I guess you don't get fully naked at all. That's the difference, I guess, between burlesque and stripping.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, so
You
is
always
there?
have your down there covered in whatever way you're choosing, and you always strip down to tassels, not necessarily tassels, but pasties. So your nipples are covered. So yeah, sometimes a pasty comes off, but that's not really allowed even in bars, right? Like you can get in trouble if you were to go out in a burlesque show and not have pasties on, they could get in trouble as a bylaw. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, you never are getting fully naked. So that could be your one difference with stripping, like
Oh.
at a, if you were a stripper at a club, like, yeah.
So being in burlesque, is there a misconception of when you're going back out in the dating world?
Yeah, I'd say there is. I'd say being a performer in general, like there's even one back in the day, I was doing a jazz sort of comedy show in Vancouver with a band. And, I wasn't stripping, I wasn't anything. I was being ridiculous and doing all these things and singing and maybe being sexy or whatever. But thing is, like, people will ask you, oh, you're a performer. That's really cool. And a lot of guys right off the bat, they love it as a concept, right? But when they come and see a show or whatever, like, a guy has to be pretty confident and has to be pretty like secure with himself because you're up there and people are looking at you and they have their ideas about you, whether they're positive or negative, right? And some guys can't handle that. And so I've found that even though they right away, everyone thinks it's such a cool thing, that actually they get insecure. And a lot of guys can't really handle being with a performer of any kind. And then adding on burlesque, and the years that I've done it since, they definitely, like we spoke about before, have the misconception that you're just like a regular stripper. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it's just a different thing. And until they get to really see it and know that, like, there's respect, it's an art form, all these things, again, there's only a select few type of men that can actually handle it. A
Has
lot
there
of
been
men.
a situation where someone has ever asked you to stop dancing?
Oh no, because I've always been the type that's like, yeah, if you don't like it, you can go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
I'm I'm pretty secure in myself and I know what I like, but it can be, what I find frustrating is that I'd like people to just be more honest. Like if it's something you can't handle, you should know that when I tell you, when I go, well, I do burlesque also, among these other things. Do you know what burlesque is? And I'll say that
Mhm.
some of them were like, oh no, oh, is it like that movie, or I know who this is, or and I'll show them or whatever, and then they'll be cool with it or they won't be, because when you're with somebody or dating someone, you want them to come to shows, you want their support just like anything, right? And I've known performers that their boyfriends just like don't go ever because they don't really like that they do it and they just sort of ignore it. And for me, it's like, yeah, they don't need to be at every show, but I don't want them to feel weird about it because there's nothing to feel weird about. I think
Not
you
when
just
it's
have
a
to.
big part of your life as well. I feel like it would just it's one of those weights that would just get heavier, I think, too.
Yeah.
If you're with somebody and their extracurricular, like what they like to do bothers you, I think that, yeah, that would put some cracks in the foundation if just left unattended.
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to being powerful as a woman. There's not every guy can handle that. It's not, you're not going to meet every single guy is not going to be okay. And that's okay. Like I said before, just be straight up. If it's uncomfortable for you, let's talk about it. Or maybe we just move on. Maybe we're not a good match. But I think it is one of those things where I just find it fascinating all the time that that first initial reaction of everyone is always like, oh, so cool, you're a performer, oh, so cool, like all these things. But then when you go down to the brass tacks, they can't really handle it. Like even acting, even like, oh, you might do a scene and you might have to kiss somebody, or you're in a play and you have an intimate scene with someone, like, there's a lot of things that people don't really think about until they're in that situation. So
Mm.
finding somebody that is cool and really like secure in their masculine vibes, that can see you being powerful and having people watch you and know that, like, they don't have anything to worry about. You know what I mean? It's it's
Well,
it's a
even
tricky
that,
find. And I think also in North America, especially, we think we're so advanced and we're so forward and we're so all these things, but when I did shows in Europe, like, it was so refreshing because, and these weren't burlesque shows, but people were so, they wanted to know what you did. Oh, you're an artist? They'd be like, what kind? Oh, you do this, you dance, you sing, well, all these things. That's so cool. Like, I love going to the shows. I love doing this. And they don't go, what else do you do? They don't
mm.
they don't try to deflect from your art, right? just because you may work another job or do this or do that doesn't take away from the art that you do. And I think that's something in North America that is what always happens and what people will always say. They always sort of downgrade people that are artists. They like the idea of it, but they don't like the instability, right? So, I mean, I've dated many guys that like literally were like, yeah, I just want to be with like a banker. Like, so like I know that they're got a paycheck and like whatever, you know what I mean? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never asked you for anything, but like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. It's not right for everybody. And I think being your own person and just understanding who you are and what you want. It took me a long time. I never understood that when I was younger, because it happened to me, like I said, whatever performing I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm more intimidating than I think I am. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I just think it's one of those things you have to sort of be aware of, and that it can cause problems. Also, like, you're performing burlesque, you're out late, right? You're not coming home sometimes on a weekday till 2 a.m. You could have
Mm-hmm.
just finished performing at 1, had one drink, got home. And if your guy is, or your partner is not cool with that, like, that's going to create issues. It's going to create problems.
Yeah. And to your point about artistry in North America, I do feel like we've lost a lot of our ability to be creative and imaginative.
Yeah.
So when people that have lost that connection with their imagination are met with someone that is so putting out their imagination, it's so in front, I do believe that it does spark something inside someone, because that imagination, that creativity, we all have it, whether it goes into hibernation or it's dormant, it's still
Mm-hmm.
there. And so yeah, I
Yeah.
do think it kind of like, some people can get a little nervous and they don't know why, but I
Yeah.
do think that it's playful. Burlesque allows you to still be in touch with this very playful, fun, imaginative side that you can get out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why I like teaching, and I teach all types of levels. And, I teach competitive kids. I do choreography for competitions. I do everything, but I like teaching adults burlesque and even sort of beginner level, because I love inspiring like the sexuality that is in everyone, and I think a lot of people, they work an office job, they're, whether they're with a partner or not, they feel dormant, they feel stuck, they feel like, oh, I can't do that, like I could never look like that. I mean, I've definitely had people, you've probably heard people say like, how do I look like you, you know what I mean, or like, how do I do it like you? And it's like, well, for one, you don't ever have to look like me, right? But I'm just going to show you the things that are going to help you find it in your own body. And I think just I've seen how people have gotten a spark, when they come back to class. And, they've definitely told me as well, but I've seen it in their dancing, and it's not necessarily even technical. It's just an energy. It's a spark. It's all of a sudden, their shoulders are back, their chest is up, they're looking up, they're not looking down, they're feeling more powerful. And I think that can only help everyone's relationship. It's not always about getting on stage, right? It's just, take class, do these things for yourself to like feel your power as a woman. We have a different kind of power, and it's ours alone. You know what I mean? So I think it's just amazing to like be able to feel your body and to feel good in it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other misconceptions about burlesque that you've come in and experienced?
I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people that see burlesque shows that are like this. Most people are very respectful. They're also told by the host, like, how to act, how to be, because you do get tips. And sometimes people will tip you, like, and put it in your garter, but you go over and you give them your leg or give them your arm, or like, you're allowing it. It's, just like with everything, it's consent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we want to make sure. And, once in a blue moon, you'll get someone that's there that doesn't understand, and they can act, as though they can do whatever if they've given you money. You know what I mean? So like
Mm.
I would say it's very rare, but it can happen, right? And that's why, you know where you're going, know where you're performing. There's always a host, there's always people that are being aware of that in the room, so that if someone is out of line, they'll get kicked out. But I'd say, like, in general, no, most people are very respectful of the art form, because that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's a performance essentially. So yeah, I think that's probably the only misconception. I mean, I remember when I was just a dancer, and I mean a dancer as in a jazz, ballet, like professional dancer. And before I ever did burlesque, if you go on a date or something and someone say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'd say, "I'm a performer and I dance and I do that." And they're like, "Oh, you mean a stripper?" And I'm like, "No." And
Mm.
this was way before I even did burlesque. So people have this, like, as soon as you say performer, all of a sudden, or dancer, they just think stripper. And it's not the case at all. There's so many types of dancers and performers per se. So I'd say that's a little bit of a misconception that they just lump everything together. But yeah, other than that, I think people have understand it more because it's been around again and it has been popular again for a long time. So
And do you think that what it's been popularized in media is pretty accurate to what it is?
yeah, I mean, I think, it's been in a lot of things. And I think with the movie Burlesque, like with Cher and Christina Aguilera came out, I think since then, because people saw it like a show and they were like, oh wow, it's like dancing, it's glitz, it's glamour, it's old Hollywood, it's all these things. So I think people started to realize, oh, it is really like an art form. I mean, essentially people in Vegas have been doing
Mm-hmm.
shows like this forever. My parents saw shows in the 70s and they were topless and, all that stuff. So that's even different because they're like topless. They're not necessarily wearing pasties. So that's a different thing as well. But I mean, there's been this type of art form for hundreds of years. So yeah.
Well, I absolutely love it. It's kind of like a performance with the audience because it's a lot about trying to pull like anticipation and building that sexual energy. So, if you had to give out some tips on how to do that, like what is kind of like the easiest ways to build that type of energy with your audience?
I think it's hard for me to go back to, because I've been performing in so many ways for so long, that I was always connecting. And I think it's really just about connecting, right? And it doesn't matter what kind of performing you're doing, is when you're on stage, you look at someone, look at them. And in burlesque, a lot of times we're close. We have like a runway or we have something where we're go through the audience or something. So we're actually like really getting intimate as far as being very close to people. And, as the character, I would go over to people and, have a sip of their drink, or like, obviously this is before COVID times, and do stuff like ruffle their hair or put their head in my chest or like all these things, right? So I'm connecting. But even when I'm, removed from them and say I'm singing on stage, I'm still looking directly at people. Some people
Mm,
don't like it, right? And then you can see that you've got to read a room. And I think in life, in burlesque, in anything, being able to read a room is very, very necessary, right? Some people don't want to be inside of it and other people do. So find the people that want you to look at them, find the energy, connect when you can. And I think that's when people can relax and they
yeah.
know you're connecting, so they can just sit back and enjoy it. So I think it's just about learning to connect. I don't know if there's any specific way to do that other than really like learning and looking at people and trying it and seeing what works, a flirty smile, or maybe your character isn't like that and maybe every time you catch someone's eye, you give them like a look. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it can be so many things, right? um Sometimes you're not playing nicey nice, sometimes it's not campy, sometimes it's darker and it's these things. So I think it's just really about connecting.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
like that sounds like a skill of being able to kind of pick up on that. And would you say that there's kind of skills that someone would need to be skills to work on to be a better burlesque performer?
Yeah, I think it is just doing it, watching it, studying it so that you can feel comfortable. And I think that's like the bottom line. When you feel comfortable in your body, you could do very little on stage. You could walk to one side and you could do one arm movement and you could be very captivating. I know a lot of performers that do very little on stage, but they're gorgeous and they know how to take everything off. And some people dance a ton and some people are funny and like all these things, right? I think it's really about
Mm,
taking ownership of your body, taking ownership of who you are, and then showing it to everyone, and you're not proving anything. And that's the thing. It's more of just being like, I'm good with me and like I'm going to have a blast and so are you. And I think once you can get into that zone, which doesn't happen overnight, right? We all have insecurities. I still do. And, I'm nervous before I go on stage every time. Once I'm there on stage, I'm not nervous at all. But the moments before, I still get nervous. And I've been performing since I was a kid. So I think it's just the way to feel the most comfortable is by doing, is by practicing, is by looking, by studying, all these things. You know, what did they say? It's 10,000 hours
Yes,
that you
yes.
have to do something for before, you really get it.
But that's
Yeah,
all
that kind of goes on
beautiful.
this other note of like a don't that I wanted to go on is, don't compare yourself to others
Mm.
when you go see a show, when you're in a show, even say you got your first gig and you're so nervous and you're watching everyone else or whatever. Don't compare your body to them. You're your own person, and just be the best you can be and feel the best you can be. Do it in stages. Don't add a bunch of things into your number that you can't do just because you've seen someone else do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Do the
Mhm.
things that you feel good doing and then take more class and get better. And then you can add those more later, right? People would rather see something a little bit more simple, clean. Someone's taking off their costume. And that's another thing. That's another don't get stuck in your costume.
Yes.
Right? We've all been there. I had a bodysuit number once and it was a snap crotch and I did it a million times and it got caught on something else. I got it off, but it's just it creates this kind of thing. And that's what, sometimes it doesn't matter how much you practice, something might get stuck. The
Mhm.
best people, like their corsets or whatever, they've gone over to an audience member and made them like undo the back, or there's always ways to go around it that keep it a part of the show without getting stressed. You just don't want to show the audience that you're stressed. If
Yeah.
it happens, make a joke of it or whatever. That's what I kind of did in the moment, is I just like made it bigger and like did a silly thing with it and it worked, right? And obviously I remember that for another time, not going to do it again, right? But that's what I'd say. And that's what the practice is just doing it over and over and over and being like, okay, like nothing's getting stuck. Like I've got this, right? So that would be a major don't get stuck in your costume. And I think I covered, yeah, don't stress out about what you can't do. You know what I mean? That focus on what you can do and just keep learning and getting better and seeing shows and going, oh, I'm kind of like that person. Like, I like the way that they did this. And I like when they went into the audience, or I like the way they did their hand movements, whatever it is, right? Oh, I love the color of their costume. Like, it can be anything, but just start to go and see and learn. And I think those are going to be your best bets.
Those were all great do's and don'ts. I want to say thank you again. But for your favorite parts, like what is your favorite part? Do you have a particular show that just sits in your heart forever that you absolutely have loved?
I mean, if we're going to talk about musical theater, because that's kind of where I came from,
Yeah.
and that actually has aspects as well. I'd say like Cabaret, Chicago, like all the Fosse musicals. It's just I really respond to that kind of choreography. It's really classic jazz style. I find there's a lot of sensuality in it. And it's also like kind of pedestrian. And what I mean that is the way that Bob Fosse choreographed was he did very sort of small movements. He wore a hat, he smoked a cigarette, like everything was, so really anyone could learn it, right? It wasn't big kicks, it wasn't all these things. Yeah, those were in the numbers too, but it's kind of an interesting way of like, it can show you that anyone can move and you can get really specific, and I think
Mhm.
that's another thing too, is like getting specific. Like it's the same as acting, right? Get specific. What's your goal in the scene, right? It's the same as creating an act. What's your goal? What's your arc? What story are you trying to tell? And I think that goes when I do a song, I do the same thing. What am I saying in the song? What does it mean to me? And then people really connect to it as well. I'm
Well,
not sure what
this
that question was, but
no, no, it's okay. Like if you had I think you answered it. Like you do like your musical.
yeah,
Sorry, it was
Cabaret, I'd say. And also Cabaret is very sexual. And it was all in a time of cabaret, underground, drinking
mm,
was illegal. I mean, right now, that the way the world is, I honestly believe that cabaret is one of the only safe places right now. You know what I mean? Like it's a place where people can be themselves,
mhm.
where audiences can be more free. You're not just sitting in your chair like watching a show. You're involved, you're having a drink, you're chatting. We don't expect audiences to be like, you're not watching a play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that kind of back and forth, you're going to hear people talking and all that. So I've always loved this style of cabaret because, it really is that vibe, and it's very sexually charged, but also every type of person. You know what I mean? It's not just for one person. Like burlesque is for everybody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like literally. So, yeah, I think those shows really spoke to me as a kid. And even before I really knew my own sexuality or anything like that, they were always, I always wanted to be able to dance that way. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I still reference that kind of choreography and that style a lot.
Mm-hmm. Would
Yeah.
you say, is there a particular struggle that you find that your first time students, is there a particular struggle that people have? Like
I mean,
nervousness, I
I'd
guess,
say,
maybe to start, or?
yeah, I'd say that most people, like, they're nervous, right? And they're, even walking across the floor, you know, as soon as I'm like, okay, we're gonna go one by one, everyone's like, oh, you know what I mean, right? And I'm just like, no, we're gonna go in succession. Like, no one's, don't worry, and everyone's really supportive. But I think people get nervous. They don't want to be looked at. They're like, I just want to do it. But I can see. I just say, try to let go, right? And that's easier said than done. And that's why you come back, right? That's
Mhm.
why you go, okay, this time I was a little nervous. And the next time, look, I can see people's eyes when they start on the floor, and then they're here, and then they're there, and then they're there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I've seen it in class, or people who take my class regularly, or even if they stop for a bit and they come back. I can see the change. I can see that the spark has been ignited. And, however you get your spark, it could be by anything, could be by rock climbing, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, just find your spark, and I hope that I help people do that.
Oh, I definitely believe you do. I think you teach people that it's okay to have a platform where you do have eyes on you. You
Hmm.
are allowed to have attention. That's what
Yeah.
I also like. We are allowed attention. We should have attention. There should be some attention on us, and
Hmm.
we have to get used to having attention. And
Yeah.
we live in a very segregated, like individualistic society where,
Yeah.
sometimes when we are getting a lot of attention, it can definitely be overwhelming for various reasons.
Yeah.
But it is something that can fuel us for better. Like we can connect to our confidence, like what you said, stand up taller. And that draws attention. Confident
Mhm.
people do draw attention as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think allowing yourself that that's okay, and allowing yourself that, like, you don't have to be like that all the time. But, when you come into your own power sexually and otherwise, watch out, because things change. They just do. Right. Like, I tell people, put on your favorite song in your earphones, go for a walk, and walk like you're on a runway.
Yeah.
Walk, do it, and just watch how people start to look at you, because your shoulders are back, because you're walking through your hips, because you're doing all these things. Maybe you feel silly for a second, but just give it a go, because you're gonna feel more powerful. It's just like using your breath, like how I talk about remembering to breathe and all these things, right? All these things that we can do to start to, like, get into ourselves and bring our own power back. I think it's good. And it's something, you don't have to do all the time, but I think it can only help, you in work, in relationships, in every aspect of your life. Because I think a lot of people are made to feel small
Hmm.
in their lives a lot. And, maybe they had hard times growing up, or maybe they were bullied, or all these things. And it's like, I was bullied a lot as a kid, actually. But I always knew inside me that I was supposed to perform. I was supposed to do these things. So it didn't matter how many times people called me names or did whatever. I was still doing it. I was quite resilient, and this was a time before bullying was a thing. Like, no one got in trouble for it before, right?
Hmm.
So I think that people in life get bullied a lot, and they allow themselves to get bullied. And I allowed it, you know what I mean? And, I'm not to say it never happens now, but I think we all have to have a time. And even if it's just a class, or it's a walk you take, or it's this, but you got to give yourself time where you're standing on your own, and that you're not going to let what others say affect you, because we can't control that. We just can't. What you put out there, there's going to be negative things about it. There's always going to be the lovers, and there's always going to be the haters, and you got to just stand on your own, because otherwise it can be too hard, and feel so heavy.
Yeah. And you're right. It's one of those things, like if we don't have that ability to stand up for ourselves, you are on the ground, you are heavy, you are feeling that. So,
Yeah.
and I think with burlesque too, and just chair, it's good to get the movement back in your body. And like just in general, we have a stagnancy about this. So it's good. Yes, join a class, get connected to your
Yeah.
sexuality through
Yeah.
there. And it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be hard at first. Like It can be difficult. There's moments in your class where I'm like, oh, can I do this? But I
Yeah.
love it because it's good to push yourself as well. And you feel rewarded after you're done your class because not only do you feel sexy, but you kind of broke a sweat and you
Yeah.
exercise a little bit. And it's a little bit of everything in a fun, playful way. And you don't even realize you're really exercising. You're having a good time.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah. And it's just coming on a Monday, after work. Maybe you don't work during the day or whether you do or not, but, I can see people's energy when they come in. And then I can see people's energy when they leave, and it's completely different, right? They're like, woo, blah, blah, when they leave, and they walk in kind of like, oh, okay, I got here, I made it, and that's the thing. You made it. Like, you got here. Like, you came to another place to take a class. Like, give yourself a freaking hand, because it's
True.
not easy sometimes, right? You get home, okay, I'm gonna get to this class. I love class and whatever, but sometimes it's hard for me to be like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going to the gym, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, So give yourself a hand when you do go, and congratulate yourself for like stepping out and feeling good, because movement is freedom, So the more you move, the freer you are. And I think we are too sedentary in our lives in a lot of ways, and it's very hard to break that, because you could be down, or you could be these things, and all the last thing you want to do when you're down is go and do something. But it's
Mm-hmm.
actually like the best thing you could do, right? So I think it's like just a good thing for people to brighten their day, you know what I mean? And that's, if I can help with that, then great. Same as seeing shows, right? That could brighten your day too. So,
Yes.
everybody get out there and see things.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. But I want to thank you for your time. You've been absolutely great. And I've definitely learned a lot about burlesque. Is there anywhere that my viewers, or sorry, my listeners can find you?
Well, you can always find me on
Yes.
the Instagram at Azura Maneater. And that's a really good place to catch my classes. I always post them. Any shows that are upcoming, I'm posting those there. So that's just sort of a really great way to find me and see what I'm doing. Obviously, my classes Monday nights at Brass Vixens, 5:45 is chair class, and 6:45 is burlesque. So bring a pair of shoes that you feel comfortable in. And for burlesque,
And
bring a
something to
little
peel off.
robe to take off.
Yes.
And Dora, I was gonna say, if you're getting married and you want a first dance choreographed, I do that as well. And choreograph something for your personalities, and can be a bunch of songs we put together. But yeah, it's been really fun doing that as well, because I get to work with most people are not dancers at all, right? So, you're really working with them of, it's fun because they'll pick a song, like maybe they met at a rave, and there was a song, I had a couple like that back in Vancouver, and their first song was like, oh man, I'm gonna forget what it was, but it was some rave kind of song from back in the day, and then they went into a really classic song, right? So it's like so fun to just do that with people, and they, as nervous as they are when they start, like to see how they grow through all the classes, and then perform on their wedding day. It's like a pretty neat thing. So yeah, or private classes in general. So yeah, just email me at Azura Maneater. So azuramaneater@gmail.com, or just send me a message at Azura Maneater on Instagram.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And I'll be sure to put all your links in the description as well, so our viewers can get you there too. But thank you so much for coming on the show. And as always, everybody, stay kinky.
Woo!